Good day to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to our Tropical Weather Outlook video for today, Friday, July 25th, 2025. It's been a couple of days, but I had to take a break. But now I am rejuvenated, I am back, and we are back to monitoring the tropics on a daily basis, especially from here on out now as we are heading into the month of August, because it looks like we now have some pretty major signals to talk about from many models, especially the European Ensembles, which I have in the thumbnail card here. And I'm going to go over that and all the global models to show what we are looking at in the tropics as we head into the month of August and we close out the rest of this week. Because it looks like we finally might be getting a legit shot for development to come out of the deep tropics for the first time this hurricane season. Obviously, if you remember last week, especially when we had Invest 93L in the Atlantic, or actually it was Invest 94L, I'm sorry, that it was in the MDR, but it obviously failed to develop. Looks like we might actually have another chance for something to try to develop in the MDR, and this time it might actually be a pretty interesting storm. I'll go over why, and I'll go over what all the models show in just a moment. Starting off with the National Hurricane Center homepage, here's what's going on in the Atlantic right now, and we have an area of interest here in the Gulf, but it is only a 10% chance of development. It's pretty much a reincarnation of 93L, which was in the Gulf of Mexico about 2 weeks ago or a week and a half ago. If you remember that, we had this area of interest here. It looked like it was going to develop for some time, but ended up not doing so, and ended up just bringing lots of heavy rain to Louisiana. This is actually somewhat of a reincarnation of that, but definitely will not develop, although you never know, but only a 10% chance of development within the next 48 hours and 7 days, and this is probably going to bring lots of heavy rain to Texas, again, as it moves inland, even though it will not develop. But obviously the heavy rain is still a very big factor, and is still very much of a nuisance, so please keep in mind of that. And then the rest of the tropics, there's not much that the National Hurricane Center has highlighted for now, but I'll show you why, once again, that'll change probably very shortly. Here in the Eastern Pacific, things are also starting to get more active as well. Generally a part of a more favorable pattern of the MJO moving into the Western Hemisphere again. So we're seeing the Atlantic light up, and we're also seeing the Eastern Pacific light up. We have an area of interest here which has a moderate chance of development within the next few days. And I think one of these areas are now tagged as an invest. I'm not entirely sure which one, but I'm pretty sure that one of them are tagged as an invest. I'll probably see once the 2 p.m. tropical weather bulletin comes out. We'll see which one it is exactly, but one of them is tagged an interest area. And I'd assume it's probably this one with a 50% chance of development within the next 7 days. This is going to move into the Central Pacific. In fact, I think it is in the Central Pacific area of interest. So there we go, an area of interest in the Central Pacific for them to watch, although it probably will, or most likely will not impact Hawaii. And then we have another area of interest close to Mexico, and that has a 30% chance of development within the next 7 days. So that's going on. That's what's going on in the Eastern Pacific. Here's a satellite picture of what is going on in the Atlantic right now. And you can see there's really not much in the way of anything significant right now. You can see off to the very far right here. Actually, this is the left. Never mind. This is left. This is right. But off to the very far left here, in the kind of top end of the screen, this is the area of interest in the Gulf, and you can see quite a bit of showers and thunderstorms this morning, but nothing actually consolidating and trying to get going. And again, we'll probably not have that happen at all as this heads into Texas, into the weekend. Some showers and thunderstorms, probably a tropical wave here near the Yucatan. And then we have a tropical wave here, and then we have a few more waves out here throughout the deep tropics, and then obviously we have Saharan air, which is coming off the coast of Africa. All of these things we're going to have to watch over the next several weeks, and you can see on the oceanic analysis from NOAA kind of just highlights where all the tropical waves are right now. And we have quite a few. We have one here in the Western Atlantic, one in the Central Atlantic, and one that just probably recently came off the coast in the Eastern Atlantic. And none of them are expected to develop right now, although I'm pretty sure we're going to have to watch one of these waves, either this one that's just come off the coast of Africa or one of them that is about to come off in a few days. We're going to have to watch that because as we head into the end of this month, which we are just a week away from doing so, we are probably going to get a chance for something to develop here in the central and western MDR. And the model signals are quite strong for it. And certainly in terms of sea surface temperature anomalies, very, very warm throughout the MDR. In general, across the Atlantic, sea surface temperature anomalies are very warm. But I especially highlight the MDR because, as I said, since the beginning of the hurricane season, since May, when a lot of people were talking about the MDR being, not so warm, especially compared to last year, and the MDR is, cooler than normal, a lot of people were beginning to doubt and write off this hurricane season. And I've been saying, I just don't think we can write off this season. I know that the sea surface temperature anomalies are going to warm up. And now, if you compare it back to May, the Atlantic MDR, especially out here in the Eastern Atlantic, has warmed up quite a bit. And it's also, very interestingly, very warm as well off the northwestern coast of Africa near the Canary Current. And that also has a bearing, too, on generally favorability in the Atlantic. So things are pretty much ready to go, and we are now heading into late July. And you bet things are going to start getting active. And as I'll show you in a little bit, the signals are already starting to appear. But really quickly, here's an actual graph of how the sea surface temperature anomalies have evolved in the Eastern Atlantic. And again, this is just to illustrate you. Look at where we were in May and look at where we are now in July. Pretty much have been on a increase since the end of June. We've slightly cooled down with sea surface temperatures in just the past few days recently in the Eastern Atlantic. Probably a brief uptick in strong trades, but that'll probably reverse and we'll probably see some warming again in a few days. So I would not put much stock into that. But again, just look at the difference where we are now in mid to late July versus where we were in May. Quite a huge difference, and I've been telling you it was going to happen, and now it's happening, and this is definitely going to have an impact on the hurricane season, especially as we get towards August and things begin to get more active, you bet. But climatology as well, things are just generally starting to get more active, and I just want to show you, especially here in the Eastern Atlantic, because as I said, that's where our focus is going to be over the next week or so, as it looks like we might get something that'll try to develop here in the Eastern Atlantic. I just want to show you, especially as we close out the month of July, just to show you how much activity really does begin to uptick here in the Eastern Atlantic. And I'll start off by showing you the second third of the month, which is July 11th to July 20th. And you can see there's some decent amount of activity here in the Western MDR. We've had a few July formations before. It's definitely not as rare as something as like June, where you barely get any June formations to occur in the MDR at all, although obviously we had that last year, and we had a major hurricane out of that, very surprisingly, although that's a very rare instance. And then beyond that, we do have some activity here in the Gulf, off the southeast coast. Those are generally the areas we look at the most anyways in July, early in the season, and then obviously lots of activity here in the Eastern Pacific. They're pretty much already nearing their peak by the time we get to July in the Eastern Pacific. In fact, in many ways, the Eastern Pacific kind of has a first peak in July. But watch, especially as we go from the second third to the last third of the month, look at how much here the Eastern Atlantic begins to fill in. So once again, this is the second third from July 11th to 20th, and now we're here at the last third of the month from July 21st to 31st. Noticeably an uptick increase in activity here in the Eastern Atlantic and in the Atlantic in general. As we're starting to get into August, things are starting to become a lot more favorable. And right now, actually, speaking of conditions and atmosphere, MJO moving into the Atlantic, which we've been talking about and I've been saying was going to happen as we get towards the end of July for quite a few weeks now. So things are also, actually becoming more favorable. And climatology, once again, second, third to last third of the month, things really begin to uptick. And you can just see that manifest now in actual activity, because here's the European ensembles, at least as of the 0Z run today. And they especially got the talk of the town yesterday because they were really aggressive. In fact, some of them actually had a pretty strong hurricane as we got into the Bahamas. And I'm not sure about that, but not only that, but there was also the European AI model last night, which showed a tropical storm developing in the Bahamas and then blowing up into a hurricane as it entered the Gulf. So the activity and the signals are definitely there, and the European ensembles definitely indicates a very strong signal, especially as we get literally into the first few days of August. And fits perfectly with how climatology really begins to become a lot more favorable out here in the Eastern MDR. And it's not just the European ensembles. Here's the GFS model to close out before we end off here. Just want to show you this. And I'm not going to show you any of the other models, especially as I mentioned, models like the European AI, because that was definitely had a huge talk. But just wanted to show you the GFS. And look at that too, as we head literally into the last day of July, into the first day of August, right there in the MDR. And this actually cuts right at the 168-day time frame. Notice how we have a wave here that tries to consolidate and actually is able to develop some sort of very small low pressure. And that definitely looks like the sign of a system here that does try to develop in the MDR. And this is once again as we head into the end of this month and into literally the first day of next month. So we'll see if this is something that we actually have to legit watch. I mean, this has very strong signals, and this is getting into a more active period now as we get into August. Obviously, as I said, it's 7 days out, and that's why you also especially cannot take a lot of these European ensembles and these long-range models super seriously when they show a very strong hurricane, as some of them are and some of them have shown. But the signals are there, and once again, it's a matter of conditions becoming more favorable, as I said they would over the past several weeks as we head into late July and early August. And as I also showed you in this video, climatology. So the bottom line, we're going to have to watch very closely as we end this month and as we head into the beginning of next month. Definitely a lot to talk about in the Atlantic and also in the Eastern Pacific too. And we'll definitely continue to keep a close eye on the tropics here over the next several weeks. But for now, there's not much else to go over today, so I'm going to end it off here. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed what you saw today, please give this video a like, comment, and subscribe to this channel, and comment your thoughts as well. And if you have any questions, definitely shoot them in the comments, and I'll definitely be able to answer. Enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe. Peace, love, and kindness to you all. I will definitely be back with more tomorrow.